So, you felt it too, didn't you? That shift, that strange, electric silence right after everything almost collapsed. Millions were seconds away from impact. Systems wobbling. Foundations cracking. People going about their normal day with no idea how close the ground was to giving out beneath them. And then it stopped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It just stabilized. Because you saw it. Before the headlines. Before the panic. Before the so-called experts even realized something was wrong. They thought nobody would catch it. That's adorable. They believed the noise would be enough. Enough confusion. Enough distraction. Enough chaos to slip something dangerous through the cracks. But you don't scroll past cracks. You study them. You don't get hypnotized by surface-level drama. You feel disturbances underneath it. That's the difference. When others consume information, you analyze it. When others react emotionally, you calculate calmly. When others freeze, you narrow your focus. And that moment, that split second where your mind sharpened instead of shaking, that's where everything changed. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't broadcast a warning. You didn't look for applause. You just moved. Precise, strategic, intentional. Like someone who has been waiting for the storm without even knowing it. And here's the wild part, they underestimated you. They saw another face in the crowd. Another observer. Another person too overwhelmed to intervene. Predictable. But you're not predictable. You're observant. You catch patterns others dismiss. You sense instability before it becomes visible. You hear shifts in tone before anyone else notices the tremor. That's not luck. That's awareness sharpened over time. And awareness, when paired with action, becomes power. Not loud power, not aggressive power, controlled power. The kind that doesn't need to scream to be felt. You stepped into something designed to spiral out of control, and you didn't fight it emotionally. You dismantled it logically, thread by thread, weak point by weak point, until the entire structure they built around deception collapsed under its own weight. That's mastery, and most people won't understand it because they think strength looks explosive. But your strength is surgical. You don't attack the chaos. You expose it. You don't wrestle confusion. You clarify it. And confusion cannot survive clarity. That's why it evaporated so fast. By the time most people even sensed something was off, the damage had already been prevented. Industries that were about to shake stabilized. Careers that were unknowingly on the edge remained intact. Trust that could have fractured stayed solid. And they'll never fully know how close it came. But you will, and that realization hits differently. Because after the storm passes, there's a strange quiet, a heavy silence. Not guilt, not pride, something deeper. That internal voice asking, did I really just do that? Yes, you did. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. This wasn't new. You didn't suddenly become sharp today. You didn't magically unlock clarity in one moment. You've always had it. Today was just the first time you trusted it fully. The first time you didn't second guess your instincts. The first time you moved without needing validation. That's what made the difference. Most people wait for permission. You acted on perception. Most people wait for confirmation. You moved on conviction. And that's rare. Because responsibility is heavy. Not the kind that crushes you. The kind that reshapes you. You felt it afterward, didn't you? That subtle weight settling in your chest. Not pressure. Recognition. Recognition that you're capable of far more than you've been showing. Recognition that chaos doesn't intimidate you. It activates you. And that scares the wrong people. Because systems built on distraction hate individuals who see clearly. Manipulation fails in front of someone who can read the blueprint. And today, you didn't just interrupt a threat. You disrupted a pattern. You proved something. That clarity moves faster than confusion. That presence overpowers panic. That discipline outlasts deception. And now something inside you is different. You're not the same person who woke up this morning. You've seen what your focus can do. You've felt what your calm can control. You've witnessed how quickly instability folds when confronted by someone who refuses to flinch. That realization doesn't make you louder. It makes you sharper. It doesn't inflate your ego. It aligns your identity. You don't feel bigger. You feel clearer. And clarity is dangerous in the best way possible. Because once you know what you're capable of, you never shrink back to who you were before. This wasn't about saving millions. It was about discovering the version of you who could. And that version, it's not going back to sleep. Here's the part nobody talks about. The aftermath, not the applause, there wasn't any. Not the recognition, it never came publicly. The shift, you walk into the same spaces, same rooms, same screens, same conversations, but something is different. It's subtle. The air recalibrates. People can't explain it, but they feel it. You're not reacting the way you used to. You're not absorbing noise the way others still do. You're not rushing to speak just to fill silence. You pause. And that pause carries weight, because now you know something. You've seen behind the curtain. You've watched chaos try to construct itself in real time, and you dismantled it before it matured. That changes a person, not dramatically, internally. Your tolerance for nonsense drops. Your patience becomes selective. Your focus sharpens like it's tired of wasting energy. You don't argue as much. You observe more. You don't chase relevance. You reinforce substance. And that shift, industry people felt it. Not because you announced yourself, because stability returned too quickly, because a threat that should have escalated dissolved, because the ripple they were bracing for never arrived. You don't think professionals notice that? They do. High-level environments are built on patterns. When patterns break unexpectedly, the sharp ones look around. What just happened? They might not know your name, but they know something intervened, and that's enough. See, here's the dangerous part about clarity: it multiplies. Once you prevent something massive, your mind doesn't go back to being average. You start scanning differently. Not paranoid, prepared. You don't look for chaos. You recognize early signals, tone shifts, data inconsistencies, behavioral anomalies, unnatural spikes, subtle fractures in structure. You read them instinctively now. That's evolution. But evolution comes with a warning, because once you operate at that level, comfort becomes the real enemy. After the storm fades, most people relax. They assume it's over. They go back to autopilot. That's how patterns rebuild. That's how manipulation returns, wearing a softer mask. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow how fragile systems truly are. You understand something now that most ignore. Stability isn't permanent. It's maintained, and maintenance requires vigilance, not fear. Not obsession. Awareness. That's your edge. You don't need to dominate environments. You stabilize them. You don't need to expose every lie. You disrupt the structure that supports it. You don't scream about corruption. You quietly remove its leverage. And that's why this moment matters more than you realize. Because this wasn't just about one threat. It was about identity. You crossed a line internally. You stopped being reactive. You became proactive. You stopped waiting for problems to announce themselves. You started detecting them before they matured. That's leadership without a title, authority without a badge, influence without noise. And influence without noise is the most unsettling kind, because it can't be traced easily. It can't be framed easily. It can't be attacked easily. You didn't fight chaos. You made it inefficient. That's the difference. Chaos thrives when attention is scattered. You narrowed it. Chaos feeds on panic. You stayed composed. Chaos survives in confusion. You clarified, and clarity spreads. People around you may not even realize it, but they respond differently now. Conversations become sharper. Decisions become cleaner. Excuses feel weaker. Because presence is contagious. And your presence changed. You carry yourself like someone who knows something others don't. Not arrogantly, assuredly. That quiet certainty, it shifts dynamics. You speak less, but when you do, people listen closer. You hesitate less, and others follow that steadiness. You don't rush to fill silence, and suddenly silence becomes productive instead of awkward. That's growth, but here's the twist. When chaos realizes it failed once, it doesn't disappear forever. It studies, it adapts, it looks for new cracks, new distractions, new emotional hooks. And this is where most people slip. Not during crisis, during peace. Comfort softens discipline, routine dulls awareness, success creates overconfidence. But you didn't win because you were loud. You won because you were alert. So now the real test begins. Can you sustain clarity when nothing seems wrong? Can you maintain focus when there's no visible threat? Can you stay sharp when the world returns to comfort? That's the level you're entering. Not hero mode, guardian mode, not reaction. Calibration. You don't chase storms. You monitor pressure systems. You don't hunt problems. You reinforce foundations. And foundations matter. Because when millions depend on stability, whether they realize it or not, someone has to remain awake, not anxious. Awake. You felt the hum under your ribs during the crisis. That wasn't adrenaline. That was alignment. Mind and instinct sensing. Action and purpose merging. And now that you've experienced that state, you'll recognize it again. Faster, cleaner, stronger. You didn't just stop something harmful. You upgraded yourself. And upgrades don't reverse. Now let's talk about the part that keeps you awake at night. Not fear, not pride, responsibility. Because once you realize you can shift outcomes at scale, you can't pretend you're small anymore. Before this, you could downplay your awareness. You could tell yourself you were just being careful. You could act like your instincts were random. Not anymore. You saw something forming that could have spiraled out and hurt people who had no idea they were standing in the blast radius. And you intervened without hesitation. That's not normal. That's alignment between perception and courage. Most people notice danger and hesitate. They second guess. They wait for confirmation. They worry about how they'll be perceived. You didn't. You moved. That's why this moment isn't fading inside you. Because something clicked. You realize that clarity isn't just a trait. It's a responsibility. When you see clearly, you carry weight. Not the weight of saving the world. The weight of not ignoring what you can prevent. And that's heavier than ego. But here's what makes this even more powerful. You didn't dismantle chaos with aggression. You didn't dominate with volume. You didn't humiliate anyone. You neutralized instability through structure, through patience, through precision. That's surgical leadership and the industry. They felt it, not emotionally, systemically. When something destructive fails quietly, analysts notice. When volatility disappears unexpectedly, professionals investigate. When projections suddenly stabilize against odds, people ask questions. They may not know your name, but they know someone intervened with discipline. And discipline is rare, especially in environments driven by speed and reaction. You slowed everything down. That's what saved it. You reduced noise. You filtered emotion. You identified the root instead of attacking the surface. And that kind of thinking doesn't go unnoticed, even if it's not acknowledged publicly. But here's the part you need to understand. You didn't win. You matured. There's a difference. Winning is about defeating something. Maturity is about evolving beyond it. You didn't prove you're stronger than chaos. You proved you're less controlled by it. That's deeper. That's permanent, because strength can fluctuate, control over self. That's foundational. You didn't panic when it would have been easy to. You didn't get overwhelmed when others did. You didn't seek credit. You didn't chase validation. You acted because it needed to be done. And that's the clearest indicator of internal authority. You operate from principle, not applause. Now here's the reality most won't tell you. Once you step into this level of awareness, life doesn't get simpler. It gets clearer. You start seeing patterns everywhere. You notice instability before others do. You sense when conversations are steering toward manipulation. You detect weak foundations in ideas, systems, and narratives. And sometimes that can feel isolating. Because not everyone sees what you see. Not everyone wants to. But clarity doesn't exist to make you comfortable. It exists to make you effective. You weren't built to float through distraction. You were built to cut through it. And now that you've experienced the impact of your focus, you won't tolerate mediocrity in your own decisions anymore. You'll question more. You'll pause more intentionally. You'll commit more decisively. That's growth. Not flashy, not dramatic, stable. The real transformation happened inside you. Before, you were capable. Now, you're conscious of your capability. That awareness changes everything. Because when you know you can shift outcomes, you approach situations differently. You don't enter rooms passively. You calibrate energy. You don't consume information blindly. You dissect it. You don't follow momentum. You assess direction. And that's how leaders operate, even without titles. You didn't shut down chaos to become a hero. You did it because your standards refused to allow damage. That's integrity. And integrity doesn't need a spotlight. It needs consistency. Here's the final truth. The world will keep generating noise. There will always be instability trying to slip through unnoticed. There will always be distractions competing for attention. But now, you know what your focus can do. You know what your discipline can prevent. You know that calm, controlled awareness is more powerful than explosive reaction. And once you know that, you don't shrink back into ignorance. You don't return to autopilot. You don't pretend you didn't feel that alignment when everything clicked. You carry it forward, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, because the real power wasn't shutting down something harmful. The real power was discovering that your clarity can protect millions without ever needing recognition. That's not ego, that's evolution. And evolution doesn't ask for applause. It just keeps advancing.